Come on, launch you bastards. We're live! Oh my god, yes, it's finally done. We're finally here, and everything is exploding on the Galaxy's Edge podcast. I love it. Today, we are joined by Daniel Caldwell of the Discord, Galaxy's Edge Discord. How are you, sir?
Pretty good, and you?
I was ranting and raving and praying that I wouldn't smash my computer to bits.
You and
But
me both.
then again, it's not the computer. It was more the, all the interfacing that we're doing. Let's see here. So now I'm going to copy some links and bring this over so we can get some viewers. But today on the Galaxy's Edge podcast, our live cast, the second of two for this month, we're talking to the Reservist, Mr. JR Handley. How are you, sir?
I am doing outstanding, although no one's called me Mister in a while.
I can call you Staff Sergeant, or Twinkle Toes, or I can go all Shazam on it and call you Captain Sparkle Fingers if you like.
Captain Sparkle Fingers, I could dig that. Then I'd be qualified for the Air Force. When I was
We don't judge.
dig that.
They had really amazing chow halls.
They did. I remember we used to sneak under the fence at Fort Dix when we were doing our pre-deployment stuff there to get onto the Air Force Base to eat at their chow hall.
And what did you have?
Better than the MREs the Army was feeding us.
Absolutely. So, Mr. Handley, what's going on with you this week? Anything groovy?
So signed some contracts for 2 new series that as soon as I get the ink dry in all parties, I'll be able to share. But just another day in the life,
The day in the life of a super publisher?
Yeah, well, they have reach. I don't. So while I still learn, I figure I might as well milk the smartest minds out. That sounded dirty, but we'll rock
on. And Daniel, how's your week going?
Oh, pretty good. Just doing projects, getting them all set up, getting property all modified and stuff like that.
What kind of property are we talking?
I got 12 acres up in Western Washington, and we're getting it set up for an event coming up next week.
Oh, no kidding. Anything fun?
We got a medieval group coming in.
Oh, really? Doing some some Arma stuff?
No, closer to just like sword and shield stuff like that. I think it's a Viking group from what I was hearing.
Are they actual Vikings?
I don't know.
They are LARPers.
I just host the thing.
I got you. Oh, I got some feedback coming through. All right, we're good. Thank you. All right, so we're going to dial it over to the other side. And since this is a Galaxy's Edge podcast, we should probably talk about some Galaxy's Edge stuff. So just recently we had the Takeover number 3 drop. You guys read it yet?
I have not. I am a slow reader, so I have been working my way through the other Order of the Centurion series, so I can get reviews out for them.
Oh, nice. Yeah, Takeover's been good because it's serial format, so they're little shorter reads. But this last one, oh my god! Have you read it, Daniel?
Nope. I'm an Audible nerd.
Oh, I gotcha. Oh my god, let me tell you, if Galaxy's Edge and Jack Bauer had a love child, it would definitely be Jack Bowie. So good. And the artwork they dropped was just phenomenal. It's Jack on the cover holding a 10R escort, we'll just say. Artwork was fantastic. The story was amazing. I love a good rabbit chase. Like tag you're it, and then everybody comes after you, and that's exactly what this story was, and so good, very satisfying ending, really rocked on all cylinders. So going with other things being read, JR, what did you read this week, or if anything?
So outside the Galaxy's Edge, I just finished Paying the Price, which is book 5 in Terry Mixon's Empire of Bone series. I'm rereading that one for like the millionth time. I love that series. And then I am reading Renegade Star by J.N. Chaney. I just finished his book 1. And I learned the hard way that some authors are not kid friendly. So I started listening in, and like the first 10 minutes was like an F bomb, and I'm like, oh, my kids aren't listening to this with me. So, and speaking of the takeover, I've got the good news is that there's only 4 parts, so it should be available for us KU readers, Kindle Unlimited readers soon too.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, it was
So,
really good. I really enjoyed it. Daniel, what did you read, if anything, this week or listen to?
Oh, dude, I've been jamming through Helldivers. It's pretty awesome. It's kind of like Metro, except in the air, as another Discord person explained, and yeah, it's a great post-apocalyptic sci-fi story, and maybe check it out.
is that the one by Nicholas Sansbury Smith? I think.
Yep.
Okay, yeah.
And when you say Metro, you're talking the video game, right?
Metro is actually based off of the book, and it's pretty close, but yes.
Gotcha.
Okay. So
Right.
it just got jumped up my list after I catch up on all the Galaxy's Edge goodness.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's in my reader's queue, actually, Helldivers. So I'm looking forward to that.
And of course,
they've got some pretty sweet covers.
Yes, they do.
And of course, check the general sci-fi recommendation for a bunch of other current reads that we're going through in the server.
Right, on the Oba Cafe Discord channel.
Yeah.
So this came up in the fan club because you guys run the Oba Discord and I run the fan club, and it came up that they wanted us to put together some of the genres that we all read and do like the best of, and then we could publish that somewhere so it's just out there, our own list, fans of. And we could do like our own, best of Mill SF, best of, because a lot of times, you find the list because you're always looking for content to share, so you have activity for the algorithms. And some of these lists, it's like, were they written like 20 years ago? There's like 100 million good books they missed, or it's the same. All of the lists have the same 10 books, and it's like, yeah, some of those books are a little dated as far as what styles are. So, we're talking about doing our own list.
Have you seen the
fan entity?
Have you seen on I believe it's on the fan club, the big contest that's going on right now?
Yes, that's been hilarious. I've been laughing my petard off.
What I find funny is like the authors of some of the Order of Centurions, like basically egging each other's on. Oh my God, I can't believe you beat me out. Screw it, I'm taking my football and going home. So for those not in the know, Chris Hemsworth,
Hemsworth,
I think this might be his name. He is doing a where to go. He is doing a contest of covers, pretty much, for pitting the Galaxy's Edge books against themselves. Oh my God, it's so much fun. They were doing the other day. Iron Wolves against Legionnaire. And basically all he's saying is, hey, here's these 2 covers. These are the 2 books going head to head with each other. Throw your vote out there. See what everybody thinks. And they're what do you call it? People are going in and voting, and and it's going tournament style. And I guess they're going to keep going until one of them is king of the hill. I'm sorry, his name is Chris Thompson.
Okay.
Chris Thompson. So if you're listening, Chris, I'm sorry. I just equated you with Thor. I'm really sorry.
Oh, Lord.
Sorry, not sorry. But the other day they had your book, JR, matched against Josh Hayes with Strikers War, and you came out on top.
Yeah, it was funny because some of the people, because I run the fan club, were voting for mine, and they hadn't read either one yet. some of the readers are in there are pure ebooks, and obviously the Order of Centurion, except for the first 2, aren't coming out until 6 months after the audiobook was dropped. And so mine will be a nice Christmas surprise as far as these books. They were just voting because of that, and so. Jonathan Yanez and Josh were going back and forth about how the Russians rigged this one too, and it's hilarious. and for a while it was tied, and so Christopher Thor was trying to get us to like do a write-off in the comments about so many words like to see who would win.
I think though from now on, Chris Thompson should be referred to as Chris Thor.
We should do
Uh,
that.
yes,
Make it a thing.
and also we should definitely make sure that he has a reserved Legionnaire handle that either states that, or we should come up with a plaque or something. So, but yeah, Chris Thompson, if you're listening, you are now Thor. And Gladiator.
Josh Hayes.
What's that?
Josh Hayes in the live chat is like, JR obviously hacked the competition.
So, the fun fact, though, I'll throw a little trivia out there. If you've read the Reservist, the cadre that came over and tortured those poor reservists, weekend warriors, was from the regiment, the Legion, excuse me, in Josh's book.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, it was the same unit.
Oh, no kidding. So his unit whipped yours into shape.
Pretty much. So he gets bonus points. That's why we won. It was because his people were so darn good.
Right on. So JR, for those who haven't met you before or who haven't followed you along, can you give us a little background as to who you are and what's on your wanted poster?
So I'm sorry, I shouldn't have stolen the cookies, but they were so dang good. And then, Aunt Jemima tried to guilt me into. I turned myself in last week. I paid my fine, so there is no more wanted poster.
It's
have
all.
Have you seen the guilt trip Aunt Jemima can give you when she stares at you? That bottle.
I am a lover of pancakes and Deadpool, so I feel your pain.
Outstanding. So let's see. I did 8.5 years in the Army. Most of it on active duty, although I enlisted in the Guard and Reserves. I played with both. 2 tours to the wonderful Mesopotamian hotspot known as Iraq. And so when I came back after my second deployment with a head injury, I did the VA had, was it writing as therapy? And I realized I could get paid for it. So here we are. So thank you, all of my therapists who buy my books. You're doing a great job.
So because you were Army, they gave you pens and a keyboard instead of crayons, right?
Correct. And they didn't have to
Okay.
tell me not to eat the glue. Now,
that's an improvement.
That's right. The tankers, though, I've seen some of those. I think they still eat the glue.
Well, anybody who puts their boots on the outside of whatever vehicle they're on, it's always a thing. So how did you get into Galaxy's Edge?
So I actually, when I first started writing, I was looking for podcasts about the craft side instead of just what the therapists were doing. Because obviously, I mean, that's good to a point. And my academic training was as a history major. I've got a master, I was almost done with a master's before my deployment in colonial American history. And that style of writing is a lot different, obviously, than fiction. And so I was on the Keystroke Medium, which Josh Hayes runs. They have a writing YouTube. I guess it's a vlog, not a podcast. I don't know the terminology, but they're on the YouTubes. And so they had Nick Cole, and he was standing, I think he was like on a stakeout under a street light. It had a very noir feel to it. And he was talking about this series. And so, I mean, I watched it. It was about a month after it came out. It's about when I found it. And so Galaxy's Edge, they were doing the hype up to it. So I bought it right as book 2 came out. And I'm like, dude, I dig this. I mean, he sold me, though, with the Star Wars, not Star Wars. And so I've just been a fan ever since. And then I was looking about what I was doing on the internet as far as social media. And I was like, I'm in a heck of a lot of author groups that are getting me nowhere. And I'm not in anywhere with all the cool kids who just like to read with me. And so I looked for a fan club for Galaxy's Edge, and there wasn't one. So I messaged Jason and Nick, and I'm like, look, I want to do this thing. You can agree with it and be a part of it, or we'll just do it anyway and smile and wave from the sidelines. And they're like, no, we'll join your little club. And the rest is history. I've been a fan since book 2.
Right on. That's awesome. If people don't know what you're talking about, what is the Galaxy's Edge fan club?
So there is a Facebook group that is closed, just so our shenanigans are our own. Some people have professional images they want to uphold. Clearly, nobody here cares about being an outward nerd, but some people were worried. So it's a closed group, but it's just a fan club for everyone to nerd out about Galaxy's Edge, and then if it fits within the larger genre that Galaxy's Edge does, so sci-fi writ large, we talk about all of the things there. But primarily, we nerd about military sci-fi and guns, and I share a lot of Gun Jesus videos. And for those of you who aren't in the know, that's the Forgotten Weapons. He does historic weapons. His fans call him
yeah.
Gun Jesus. Because his haircut, like he needs to get one. He looks like a damn hippie, but he gets to,
and the goatee.
Yeah, but he gets to play with those sweet, sweet guns, man.
Oh yeah.
He got to fire a puckle gun for crying out loud.
Oh dear God.
And he fired an anti-tank rifle. The German one.
Yeah, screw you and the neighbor 10 counties over. My goodness.
I got to fire back in the day 90 millimeter recoilless rifle and a 84 millimeter, the Carl Gustaf. That was a lot of fun.
I'm pretty sure. So my grandfather was a recoilless rifleman in World War II, and I'm pretty sure it was the 90 millimeter. But don't quote me, because I only found out what he did when he passed, because he didn't talk about it. But yeah, those were some impressive weapons.
Hell yeah. Just to date myself, I have a 2-stage MOS. I was originally an 11 Bravo, an infantryman in the United States Army, but I had a Charlie 2 designator, and I always used to love when I would go to a new unit and they'd grab my paperwork and say, "What the hell is this?" And they'd look up the code. I'm a Dragon missile gunner.
Nice.
So
what's that?
Dragon missile is a man-portable version of a missile called the TOW. TOW stands for tactically sighted, tactically guided, optically sighted, wire-controlled missile. And
like a giant taser gun.
Yes. So basically, you fire a missile out of a launcher that has a monofilament cable that leads back to the launcher, and as long as you leave the reticle on target, it has micro rockets that will allow it to change course. Minor. It's not going to do a full 360, but it'll adjust course so that you can hit a tank. The downside is that with the range and the huge plume of smoke this thing puts off, the fact that you have to sit there and aim this thing until it hits the target when the tank knows you're there after you pull the trigger kind of sucks. So I'm glad I never had to really use one in combat. That would have sucked big time. But yeah, that's dating myself because they stopped using those in like the 80s pretty much.
So yeah, I had multiple MOSs too. I enlisted as a watercraft operator at boatswain's mate because it sounded like a cool thing to do on the weekends while I was going to college to get a commission.
Right on.
And so when I went through, they said, "Hey, how would you like to volunteer to go through infantry OSUT? Because if your boat breaks down, you're infantry too." Because I did a riverine squadron unit, so we were doing close support for river ops for infantry units. So I went through basic training, did the OSUT at Benning, got out, did really well. I got to my unit that I was supposed to join. My recruiter said all kinds of good things. Yeah, it shut down in 1974. Someone just forgot to tell the Army. And so they said, "Well, welcome to the truck driving school." And so they sent me right back to a third MOS right after. I mean, I spent so much time with drill sergeants, I should have gotten a brown round myself. And so they sent me out to Fort Hunter Liggett, California, the worst place on earth. And not necessarily California, just Fort Hunter Liggett. And they had me do 88 Mike School, like an expedited version, which is a truck driver. And so many people don't know this, but in the Army, if you're a ground guide, if you're the driver and you do what your ground guide tells you, the one walking in front saying, turn here, it's not your fault. Shy of driving off a cliff, anything that happens is the ground guide's fault, as long as you're listening. Well, I didn't know it. The guy was on the phone, so he told me to turn it too wide because we were the outside truck. And instead of parking, I took over and took out a row of porta potties. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on who you ask, the person in the last porta potty happened to be the sergeant major.
Oh my God!
After he gets out covered in blue goo, sputtering as you would, he's like wants to yell. I followed the instructions of my ground guide, sergeant major. I thought I was going to die. He looked like he was going to reach out and throat punch me. But luckily for me, the ground guide was connected. Like his dad was somebody. I never found out the whole story. So the next day was the last day of the school, and we had to do the shoot, move, and communicate. So you're basically firing from your moving vehicle, and they time you for speed through the course and then accuracy. And the ideal is to blend the two, right? So get the fast as you can, but get as accurate as you can. And I happened to break the course record for merging the two. And he came up to me the next day smiling, and he's like, "Welcome back to the infantry, son." And that OSUT training I did as a secondary became my primary, and I spent 8.5 years in the infantry.
Dear God.
I got to my first unit, and I'm like, "Did you know what my ASVAB score was?"
Yeah, they don't care.
They didn't care. There are lots of, you get the stereotype about the grunt, but there are a lot of really smart infantrymen, especially with the new tech where you can't be an idiot and operate those strikers, man.
No, yeah. We had my last unit, we had ASVs, and those took a minute to get used to. Of course, it always sucked trying to dual load weapons when you were in a hurry, like because you got a Mark 19 and a 50 cal on top.
Yeah.
So that was always fun. So
turning this back to Galaxy's Edge, am I the only one that pictured the slicks as a little bit like a flying striker?
I don't know. I kind of, when I read Tin Man, the way they described the cockpit and everything, I thought of it as almost like a CH-47, a
okay,
Chinook.
I can see that too.
You know, because they had really roomy back ends for troopers, and then they had like a lower, viewport that they had below the pilot's feet. So I pictured it more like a helicopter than anything else.
Yeah.
Okay, I can see that too. Maybe it's just because my point of reference, my last unit was a striker unit, so I was picturing that in my head. But yeah, that could see the Chinook too.
Right on, man. But back to, like you said, back to Galaxy's Edge. So you start the fan club. You're into the books. Everything's rolling along, and suddenly you decide, I need to write in this universe. What dirt did you have on Jason and Nick in order to make that happen?
I think just starting the fan club was all they needed. And so when they started looking for other authors in 2017, it's hard to believe it took that long to get the book out. But, their production schedule was slowed up by the Audible stuff. But Nick approached, and, he does that really grandiose Godfather sort of thing. He's like, I need you. I pictured a cigar and a scotch in his hand, even though I know he doesn't drink. And he's like, I need you to send me a copy of your first book. I'm like, oh, okay, maybe he's gonna like blurb it, review it, something. Sure, I'll it was on sale for 99 cents. I'll spend the 99 cents to gift you that, because I published that through another small press. And so I sent it to him, and like, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks, nothing of it. Maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, he approaches and he's like, "We're doing the Order of the Centurion books. How would you like to write one?" I'm like, "Dude, I'm down." And that's sort of where we went.
Right on. And how did that process go? I mean, did you draft an outline? But before we get into any of that, talk about the map.
So what started with, because it all links together, the map is awesome. Jamie Glover designed. I'm an infantryman at heart. So when I write my battle scenes, I use sand tables. Like I turn my dining room table, not with sand, but like Legos and sponges for the green little scratch pad becomes the woods. Like I have it all laid out and plan the tactics accordingly, because I'm that much of a nerd, and it's fun, and I can justify it as like work to the wife. That lasts about a week, and then she wants her dining room table back. So just a warning to all you who think about trying that. And so I was looking at what to do, and I think it's book 2, or maybe it's Kill Team, where they have Low Pack, and he's talking about all the atrocities the MCR has committed. And Rissus Wan was one of them. So I'm like, I'm going to write about that. It's enough on the periphery, but it's a tie-in. And that's the trick if you're writing in someone else's universe, is you don't want to have to interact too closely with the main storyline, because then it gets more difficult and you've got reader expectations. But if you write in the world and you play on the periphery, you're enhancing rather than, potentially spoiling the pot, right? And so I started writing that. And then Jason did an interview with someone, and he was making a joke, and he was quoting that old airborne cadence: "You want to be airborne, you got to be thin." And I'm not a skinny dude since I got out of the Army, so I started, I'll show you. So my story of Rissus Wan became a Legion Reserve unit. and it went from there. And then once I started doing that, when we got to and this isn't really a spoiler, they talk about this in the blurb, but when they got to Camp Jericho, which was a converted castle, I drew a strip map of it, basically an outline, so I could play with where they were. And I sent that to Jamie, and it turns out, and I don't remember, I'll find out and I will get it to the fan club, but the map that's in there is actually an existing castle in Wales.
Really?
Yeah, he actually found, and it was one that was actually built into a cliffside too, pretty sure, because in the book, the castle has two of their sides are sheer cliff face, and so he found one that almost perfectly fit with very minor moderation to what I had, and man, that looks sexy.
That's pretty cool. And the map got included in the book.
It did. My if you've listened to me talk, like my process, with my head injury, I have I think it's called word aphasia. I get it wrong. My wife was a speech therapist major, so she corrects me all the time. But basically, sometimes I forget words. So like, and we'll use this as an example because I always use it. Like instead of the washing machine, I'll be like that box you put clothes into, which for normal people could be anything, but she knows, oh, he means the washing machine. And so she'll go back through and correct a lot of that. And my mom also helps. And she stepped up a lot for this book because my wife was recovering from a car accident. And so she did some years working for the Department of the Navy as admin. And so she took, the other thing we included was I actually went through the Medal of Honor citations, and I used that model. And I wrote a citation for the Order of the Centurion for Benji. And that's included as well, an actual certificate.
Yeah, I gotta get the hardcover version of that book.
I don't know how they decide which ones make a hardcover, because I know there's some costs involved with that.
Or at least a paperback, because again, Audible listener, so I'm just like I missed out on that.
Right on. The map was pretty cool, but the reading of the citation at the end, I mean, if you've had anybody in the military in your family at the very least, or you had yourself served, you know that when somebody reads anything Silver Star or above, it's usually pretty gut wrenching. And I know, like, I had read Striker's War from Josh Hayes, and that end just was like, no, I was cutting onions. It was, oh my God, and you read that, and even though this is a fictional account, this is also, it tugs at the heartstrings because you might have known somebody that's gone through something like that, or whatever, and reading the citation, or or when it goes to Audible, listening to the citation for
exactly.
Yeah, you hear that and you're just like, God Almighty. But I remember it was like the third or fourth battle in the Reservist, and I'm just like, God, these guys are in a meat grinder. And the National Guard in my state, when they did the invasion of Iraq in 2003. When they had the big surge going up, your book reminded me of what they went through so vividly, because when they got there, their equipment wasn't up to spec. A lot of them didn't even have proper body armor. I mean, you name it, everything was going wrong for these guys, but they still went in there and just like owned it. And you see a lot of similarities to that in the book. Especially, I really enjoyed your talk of the reserve fleet, and like, the way the ships were being maintained and stuff like that, which was wild.
How they were like so out of date, and it's like, oh yeah, even though it's Ohio class and a real big ship, it's still low tech,
Yeah, maintenance hadn't been done in a while. Oh, don't worry, this bulkhead just it drips, but we're sure it's not anything harmful, mostly.
So that actually started. So the meat grinder aspect, I was actually part of the surge for my last deployment, or at least one of the first surges with 05 when I was there for my last tour. Like, a lot of us, I was in a composite IRR unit, so people that like had finished their time. Most people think if you sign a contract for 4 years, you're done in 4. You actually owe Uncle Sam 8 as the standard. So if you don't do all of it or active reserve. You owe it on an inactive ready reserve. So instead of a draft, they just call those people back up. And so my unit was made up of a lot of people that, got out under Clinton in the first Gulf War, and they got paid a little bit of money every year to stay on the IRR rolls, thinking they were never going to get called up. And then, old enough to be your grandfather, and suddenly they're a specialist again at war. And so some of that was personal experience. And then as far as the fleet, like I like the idea of having the big fleet, but when Jason, and I didn't tie it to a specific timeline, but Jason was like, if you want it to be Ristus 1, it has to be about 19 months after Kublar. And at that point in time, this is what's going on. And like, he's got the headcanon down to like, he could write his own dang encyclopedia. He's got like that granular understanding of the universe. I tend to be a little bit more fast and loose. It's a skill I had to learn with him to be more precise. So he's like, well, okay, we'll let you have the Ohio class, but think about it as a floating museum. I'm like, I could get behind that. We've got the Missouri, I think it is. It's in Norfolk.
Right on.
Virginia. So, I mean, they're like ships that, instead of decommissioning them, they're floating museums essentially. In theory, they could be put back out to sea. So I sort of used that, and we tweaked it enough that we could keep them in the books because, part of the start of was it had to start badly with the fleet.
Right on. How much of your personal experience ended up in this book?
A lot of it. I mean, obviously, I've never fought giant dog-like creatures, but I mean, I might have dated one or two of those, but don't judge me. All right, privates are going to do what a private's going to do.
Well, Friday and Saturday you have to live fast and loose.
and they must the women outside a military base sense your desperation. But so. It's how do you say this without sounding like an egotistical jerk? So when I went to for the PTSD group I'm in at the VA, they have various levels, and for those of us who saw a lot more action than most, we have our own sort of special category and PTSD groups. And so I'm in the group that has a lot of like people from NAM as far as the level of carnage that we saw. I had a first sergeant who thought he was going to make sergeant major by volunteering us for missions. So I did 27.
Oh, point.
Yeah, basically. So I had 27 combat missions in Iraq as far as escorting convoys, running gun trucks on my second tour. So of the 15 weeks I was there, because, a mission wasn't like a day thing. It was, sometimes weeks at a time. I think I was in the base, which was at Camp Arif John, Kuwait. I think I was there, of the 15 months I was there, for maybe a total of 4 weeks, all told, if you add the between mission time. So I spent a lot of time outside the wire where it's just you and whatever higher power you believe in, and your buddies, of course. So there's a lot of me in there. I don't think, there obviously you amp that up to about a bazillion because they're freaking Legionnaires. But
now, since writing the book, the main character, Fetch, he gets whipped into shape by that, and once again, this show might contain spoilers, so make sure you clear the corners if you don't want to hear what I'm going to say. Cut bait and run. So, the main character gets pretty brutally trained by a couple of the Legionnaires from the active duty side. After writing those sequences and after, your character going through that, did you say, man, I got to get into Legionnaire shape so I can fit into my armor?
Yes. I've actually, after writing that, I'm like, damn, I'm the fat guy we're making fun of in this book. So I've been, I've been walking a little bit extra, and it helps though. So I found for me the trick is I used to listen to podcasts when I would go for my walks, and it's great. It keeps your mind active. And I found that if I listen to a book, especially a good book, like an action book, I'm like, I'll only let myself listen while I'm walking. And then you find, well, damn, I got to walk another lap, which is like a half a mile, because I want to know what happens next. I can't just leave it here. And so since I started in 2017, I'm actually down 6 inches at the waist just because I've been walking, listening to good books. So I've been doing it myself too.
So question, in addition to that, are you a good baker? Can you make some donuts for us? Nick Cole might love you.
No, I can't cook to save my life. I could burn an MRE probably.
Ooh.
You were the guy that always started the fire with the water heater, right?
Yes. So when I was getting engaged, it became so much of a running joke that one of the guys I went to grad school with got me as an engagement present a book by Campbell put out, A Man, a Can, and a Plan, and it's no Maxim put it out, and it was it's a cookbook for dudes that had like 4 ingredients and all. I mean, so high in salt, don't eat it, you'll die, but it tastes delicious.
Oh my God, that is
So
fantastic.
I'm a horrible cook. I do lots of salads now because I feel like nobody can mess up a salad. I say that, and there's going to be somebody like, hold my beer. But as it sits on this recording on August 16th, like I think salads are pretty much hard to mess up. So I do a lot of salads.
Right on. So for those who might not have checked into the actual book or checked into the Reservist, can you give us a quick elevator pitch of the story itself?
So Weekend Warrior finds out that 2 weeks, 1 week in a month and 2 weeks in the summer is a load of bull when the Uncle Sam, or in this case the House of Reason, decides they want your services. And so they get sent on what's supposed to be a milk run. For those of you who don't know, it's like an easy mission. They were just supposed to be a projection of force, show up, look impressive, and let the real Legionnaires do the real fighting somewhere else. And it turns out to be anything but.
Right on. Now, there's a lot of interesting interactions in the book with Fetch and his unit trying to deal with higher headquarters. Because, like most reserve units, they're attached to an active duty component. Did you go through a lot of that in your time overseas? And how much of those interactions in the book might have been taken from something where names were changed to protect the guilty?
So I did. Not only was I, the training component, because I was brought on as, at this point I'd been on active duty long enough. Technically, I could have been active duty, even though my status was always mobilized reservist. And so we had to work with, we had IR units, so we had no rear echelon. Like, when a guard or reserve unit deploys, they've got staff still in wherever they're from that still maintain the building, and so they've always got someone in a pinch they can call. In fact, there's been a couple of cases, I think famously it was Grenada, where they called home because they couldn't communicate, like with cell phones. I could be butchering this historical reference, but so it's happened in the past. Well, we didn't have any of that. And so we were sort of on our own with a chain of command that was like, who are you again? And what are you doing on my base? Like, we're the ones that brought you the guns. Yeah, us. Hi. And so, yeah, there was a lot of that involved. In fact, we actually got in a firefight while I was over there with the Marines because our LT lost the SOI, which is basically all the data for comms for Third Army, which is Iraq, Afghanistan, Kuwait, Qatar. I think even Djibouti is part of Third Army, but I could be wrong. So it's important stuff he lost. It's not supposed to leave the armor, but I don't know. Anyway, long story short, they didn't trust us with that information anymore. So we went on to resupply the Marines. And because we couldn't do the frequency hopping on our SINGARs, like, oh, this Army convoy might not be the Army. So they started shooting at us. So that was us. And then, of course, we shot back. And I'm only alive because it's a lie, the one shot, one kill. All right, people, go Army.
So every Marine as a rifleman might just be good advertising.
Yeah, I will say that about the Marine Corps. They have the best PR flax in the world.
Right on. Absolutely right on.
And a 6 set of dress blues.
They always look good in their dress blues too. Yeah, you see some Army guys, a couple years later, and you see those memes or people posting pictures on FaceBase of them trying to get back into uniforms. That's always fun.
So as long as we could find a maternity uniform, I'm good to go.
So, JR, I did have a question for you.
Shoot.
So, in the Reservist, I don't know if it was just my ineptitude of listening, but did you ever go over what actually happened when before they got dropped off the ship? I know how, spoiler alert, the command crew essentially got vacuumed out into space. But was there any more backstory to that? Like what actually happened?
We say it. It's not the focus because we did first person, so the focus was fetch. But basically, can I give spoiler? Well, you've already said spoiler alert, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna spoil the heck out of this, people. Basically, the MCR coordinated much like a Green Beret or a Delta Force team would. They coordinated with the Rissus, the cultists, basically on Rissus One. And so they didn't have a huge fleet, but they had a whole crap ton of mines, and the minefield is a great equalizer. So they just, hey, this is the expected avenue of approach if they were going to come in and try to make their presence known. So let's leave a bunch of mines, and then the reserve fleet didn't check or couldn't check. We never said, and they just basically ran at full speed into floating mines, and so it just happened to catch one.
Oh, got it.
And if if you've got your forces
That makes sense. Okay, cool.
In the Navy, they don't ever let the CO and the XO on the same spot of the ship in combat ops.
Just in case somebody needs to control who gets the keys to the galley. I gotcha.
Absolutely. Oh. Somebody's got to make those donuts for us.
I just like how in some form or fashion, we managed to link donuts into this just to give Nick Cole something to talk about.
Yeah, I hear that's how you bribe him, with donuts.
Yeah, donuts and amazing coffee if you follow him on certain social media. We lost Daniel. I think he might be back in a minute. It's probably I'm going to blame the cultists on Rissus One.
I believe it. They're dastardly sons of a gun.
So
I felt bad for them when I wrote that, but I'm like, if it's bad enough, like if you read the main series, you know what kind of sort of scoundrel, in a sense that Han Solo never was. You know what kind of scoundrel Low Pack was, and I'm like, if he's saying it's an atrocity, it's got to be really bad, like And so I started thinking, I'm like, how bad can it be? And then when I wrote it, I'm like, man, I'm probably roasted in hell for this. This is horrible, but it had to be done for the greater good.
For the greater good, the story must be served. So how did you come up with the inhabitants of the planet, and was that a collaboration between you and Jason?
No, I just I had a PDF of the D&D monster manual as a starting point. And, I rolled. I figured there was I think however many pages there were. I went and I rolled dice to get the page number, and whatever page it happened to be was that. And so it was like a hyena type creature, and I'm gonna see if I can pull up that document, and I'll even tell you what it was.
It was a Knoll, wasn't it? GNOLL.
I think so. Let me look that up real quick.
Big hyena men.
Like, yes.
Yep, I'm showing my nerd cred, but that's okay because I can fight. So anybody wants to call me on it, we can arm wrestle and then roll dice later.
Oh, dude, I'm gonna be playing D&D Saturday.
Right on.
Yes, you're right on. It was a Knoll. So whatever page the monster manual, because I have the third for the PDF. I have the 3E version for the PDF. So whatever page Knoll is on is the dice number I rolled.
Cool deal. And how did you come up with some of the culture?
So, and for people asking how I did the dice roll, you can get a random dice generator like online, just Google it, and you tell it the number of like the window it can go, and that's what I did. I went by the number of pages in the manual.
So how did you come up with the culture for those guys?
I just started thinking, just by looking at them, the hyena type thing, they're pack animals. So I started doing that. And so there's actually sort of like a dual culture almost. And this was sort of inspired by, and this is going to show my age, but I watched Rambo as a kid. Like when I would get sick from school, that was a production to watch all of the Rambos back to back. And I think it's Rambo 3 where he's in Afghanistan.
Gotcha. Yep.
And at the beginning of, the shenanigans with Russia. And so they had a distinctive cultural snapping point, if you would, between the city dwellers and the more nomadic. And so I had like the warriors they encounter were sort of nomadic, and then the city people would do what urban people do, which is not a lot of anything. And so that was sort of the inspiration. Was I wanted them to be pack animals, and to sound primitive, because I know, just as just my own experience in Iraq, when you deal with some of the locals, it sounds primitive to your cosmopolitan ears, but that doesn't mean they're stupid. And if you ever think that, it's at your peril. And so I tried to use that, like my interaction, and how at first you kind of look down on them because they're living in mud huts with whatever, but then you talk to them and you realize that there's more to it. And I tried to let that influence what I did.
That's what I've heard a lot of from my mom when she went to Afghanistan and Kosovo. Just being around the people, it's a completely different world.
And that's one of the things that, take the religion out of it, because we don't need to go there here, but culturally, like there's this huge deal in a lot of Arab countries where like hospitality is very important. And so they could have, I don't know, whoever's the worst person in the world to you, if they get invited as a guest into their house, before they know it, like they're going to treat him like he's freaking Gandhi, because that's just their culture. They might kill him when he walks out the door because he's not a guest anymore, but as long as he's a guest in my house, then dang it, he's going to be protected and he's going to be treated well. And so I wanted sort of some of that culture I experienced, because for all the war-torn centuries and everything that is Iraq and Afghanistan, there's some beauty there too. And I at least for my own peace of mind, I wanted to remember that.
That's really cool, man. Yeah, I can attest that some of the best and warmest interactions I had were over meals with sheikhs and military commanders who treated me no different than, hey, it's cousin so and so, he's back from this town. Hey, come on, come have a meal. So that was always interesting.
And so because I ran gun trucks, convoy escort platforms, they called it, because gun trucks sounded too mean. Hello, House of Reason. And so I, as the security commander, meaning I was in charge of the stick of gun trucks, the 3 that worked for me, plus 1 or 2 from whatever convoy we were escorting. Because I was in charge of them, I got to interface with all the TCNs, so the third country nationals, basically non-American, non-allied nation civilians that were hired to do these jobs. And so a lot of the drivers were from like the stands, like Pakistan and stuff like that. And so they were very close to nature kind of environment they grew up in. And so I worked with a lot of those, and I sort of left that because they were some of the most friendly people I've ever met. So, and I wanted to showcase some of that beauty, because it'd be really easy to write it really one-sided.
Right on.
And the galaxy already has that with the Cougs and the Donks. So I wanted this one, and in a good way. They deserve to die. I'll fight you. They deserve to die. Humanity first, people. But anyway.
That's very Empire of you.
I did nothing wrong.
So JR, if you were to set up a booth at like Comic-Con or something like that with Nick Cole and Jason Onspot, would you get booth babes?
Well, given that I'm a little bit portly, I'll probably get booth grannies.
Oh my God.
It's the reserves. We don't get the nicest of everything.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's I'm gonna stop there. So talk.
I was just okay. Yeah, we'll move on.
Yeah, I'm gonna move you on before you get yourself in trouble. Talk about the Lark, because the armor of a Legionnaire is like not only to me it resembles the Yoroi of old Japan. It's not only supposed to strike fear in your enemies, but it was also a badge of station and rank. So talk about the Lark and what makes that different than the standard Legion armor.
So first, I love acronyms, all things acronyms. When I was at the school for the infantry, one of the guys that was there was a National Guardsman who literally was a college rugby player, was drunk. He's like, I think I'm going to enlist in the Guard. They're never going to deploy us anywhere. Because this was 99, where world peace might have been attainable. Someone forgot to tell the news people. Anyway, so I always liked that word because he said, I'm going to enlist on a lark. And he was very proper, like New Englander. And if you've ever heard how they talk, I can't mimic it, so I won't try. But that word sounded funny. So when I was looking for acronyms for it, I'm like, if I could fit that into an acronym, I'm totally going to do it. And so I made it work. Legion Armor Reserve Kit, LARK. And so basically the idea was military contractors have been the same since the dawn of militaries. And so they never produce the quality that they demonstrate when they show the purchasing agent. When the purchasing agent sees it's like top of the line. What you get, well, your leather boots might be made of cardboard and dissolve in the first rain. And so I was thinking along the lines of it basically be like the Legionnaire armor from the book 1 Legionnaire. So before they switched to the silver shiny nastiness.
Right on.
But then it wouldn't be as good. Right. And then the planet that they were from was Caledonia was very Caledonia was the system, Pictavia was the planet, but the it was a hot place, so their armor was designed for the heat, and then send them to the polar opposite with frozen wasteland mountains. And that was also inspired by my time. So when I did my desert training, I did it in the winter at Fort Dix, New Jersey. So I'm out there in tan, the BDUs, preparing to train for the desert warfare in snow up to my ankles. And so I wanted to show some of that incongruity with what they were given and versus what they actually needed. And that's where the armor started.
That's pretty badass. Yeah, some of our guys here in my home state, same thing. Going to the desert, they sent them to Fort Drum.
Yeah,
because that makes sense. So
and I did the same thing. I did the same thing with the blaster. So instead of the N4, it was the NM4. Like I added an extra acronym because it was coming from the Royal House of Caledonia, as opposed to, and of course they want looks good, but you got to figure a guard or reserve unit. Until something happens, they're mostly like put down riots. Help after a hurricane, whatever weather emergency. And so their gear is optimized for their mission. They were never intended to be frontline troops until they were.
I thought it was cool how you had it set up. If I'm not mixing up books and stuff, because I can do that, how you had it set up where their guns wouldn't fire accurately or whatever because it was so cold.
Yes,
right?
That was this one. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I thought that was pretty neat. It's just like, okay, if we keep firing, our guns will work and keep the charge packs warm. But yeah.
Yeah, that was my experience. I lived in Philadelphia, outside of Philadelphia for a little bit, and it was so dang cold coming from Virginia. So I'm like, I wanted to show some of the equipment doesn't always work the way it was intended when you put it in extreme weather conditions. And anything designed for extreme heat is going to have different concerns than something designed for extreme cold. And so I just tried to make it, just when it was getting bad, I made it worse.
Oh, we saw a lot of that in this book. Every time somebody caught a break, it was time, nope, let's break out the sandpaper, toilet paper, and make sure it's not fine grit. We're gonna mess up somebody right here. It just seemed, holy crap.
So the part of that was because you figure if it was bad enough that Lopak is going to call it atrocity, then that has to mean something just based on his character, right? And then on top of that, if they're qualifying, now keep in mind they also give the Order of Centurion out for political reasons, but if they're giving it to just an average Joe, then if he earned it, So that was sort of my thinking. So it couldn't be just run-of-the-mill combat operations. They're not giving you the medal for that. There's a reason that, what was it they said, like 98% of the people that get it die?
Mm-hmm.
So I'd have to reference book 1 in that series. Order of the Centurion says it, I think, in the opening, about how rare it is for someone to receive the medal and live.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because normally you're talking traumatic experiences. I mean, we just had video shown of the first recorded incident of a Medal of Honor being won by someone, and just the sheer volume of crap that dude went through was just like, oh my god, and unfortunately, he did die in the process, but he saved the lives of the entire teams that he was there to support. Just I can definitely see what you're talking about.
Right, and so that was the thinking, was it couldn't be too easy, or it would just be a Galaxy's Edge book. It wouldn't be an Order of the Centurion book.
Right on, because in the Order of the Centurion books, we want some level of pain because that award is the highest award that can be received.
And it also flushes out the universe. You get to meet some of these cool side stories that tie back in. I think the ones that were the best received were the ones that had tie-ins to the main universe without being too on the nose. Because if you get too close to the main series, well, that's not how I pictured it, or that's not how I think he should sound. So you got to play just close enough to the periphery that you avoid the minefield, but close enough they can see you.
Right on. The you were talking earlier about how equipment that was meant for one environment was not what they had, but not what they needed. I can definitely attest to that. We in the early '90s we went to winter warfare school in Petawawa, Canada, and it was funny because they had their version of the M16 M4, which was funny. They called it a C4, and we're like, that's or C6. They had C7, I believe, was a saw. But it was funny because even though they had all this American designed equipment, they were like, hey, we'll give you this, and this if you give us a metal magazine. And we really couldn't figure out what they were talking about until we realized they had plastic magazines.
Oh, really?
Wow.
In 20 below weather,
Yeah, that's not good.
one hard impact and those things would shatter. So every time they saw our metal magazines, our chain of command was like, hey, guys, make sure those things stay in the pouches.
You're adrift as a gift, my friend.
Right? The bar, right? This all starts, like all great stories, in a bar. So how'd you come up with that? Was that something that was fully formed, or did that come out of conversations with Jason and Nick?
I liked starting it at a bar because you could set the expectation up that this is just it. Whenever you tell first person, you have the character is not the most reliable narrator. He's telling it as he saw it, as he remembers it. And anybody that studied history knows, or criminal justice, that eyewitness testimony is often unreliable at best. And so I wanted to set the stage where one, he's drinking, two, he's at a bar with another Legionnaire. So if some of the details come out and it's not quite what happened, but close enough, you've got an understanding. Well, that's how he saw it, right? Because in theory, you have to, whenever you play in someone else's world, you have to understand they might like what you did enough that they want to take what you did and go somewhere else with it. So if they ever wrote a series where they go and finish conquering the Reservist one system, and they want to change anything, you've set up the perfect alibi. Well, he was drunk, or that was just his narrow little stretch. And so I wanted to set that up. I wanted to use the bar on Utopion because they had been there before in the other series, and I thought it was so cool. And everybody talks about it in the fan club and the insiders group, and I've started to see it talked about in the Discord too about that bar. But we didn't flush it out. It didn't have a name. The bartender was just the bartender. He was a gruff old dude, but we never really said more than that. And so you see that in Kill Team. And so I wanted to do it. The fun thing was that Jason Ansbach actually is the one that named the bar finally in my book, well, our book, because he did a true co-write with me. And so he named it the Sleeping Legion after my first series, which I thought was kind of cool.
Hell yeah.
And then we took the Legionnaire was from a certain legion that Victory Company may or may not be a part of.
Oh, it's pretty cool.
And so we went from there. And then, of course, a lot of the names are from the insiders, as far as like, they get their cameos, or sometimes they don't die when they're supposed to. So
That's pretty wild, man. So, Daniel, you got any more questions for Mr. Handley?
What was it like working with Nick and Jason?
So they had, I think there's 6, maybe 7 total coming out. I'd have to check. But their Order of the Centurion were split up. Nick Cole did half and Jason did half. So I actually worked directly with Jason. And it was definitely a lot of fun. It was a learning experience. Sometimes I would use words because I liked the way it sounded, even if I wasn't quite using it right, because it sounded good. And I used the word macabre because I love that word. It just sounds cool. And I knew this was going to be an audiobook. And so he's like, you said this is a macabre scene and all you showed was a little bit of, overturned chairs. Like, that doesn't work here. And so, of course, the answer wasn't take the word out. Heck no, I'm going to make it even worse in that room. And that was like the scene where I described the explosion that cleaned that killed the chain of command. So it was definitely, it was a learning experience. And then the edits, I mean, we went back and forth. I edited that thing twice. So I went through it all total 3 times. Heavy edits with Jason sending it back a chapter at a time. Like, no, this doesn't work because the easy fixes, of course, were the ones that were just, you can't have slug throwers because those are cool, but those are rare. So I had to, all the bad guys. I originally had everyone, their pistol was a slug thrower as their sidearm. I figured I could get away with it because they're reserves. They do what they want, right? And Jason was like, yeah, no, you can't do that. So we had to change some of it. It was a learning experience, I would say. I got a crash course and a PhD in Galaxy's Edge. The tank battle was especially fun to write. If you read that, you could tell that I had literally just gotten done reading Starship Troopers again when I wrote that scene, because he was certainly on the bounce.
Right on. Yeah, I caught that. That was cool.
And so that was a lot of fun. And then that was the biggest thing, was working with Jason with the edits was a learning experience.
Now, what do you call it? When they in that scene, did you know you were going to use an HKPP mech?
Yeah, that was cool.
I did. I originally wanted it to be an older model because the reserves, like I deployed with a guard unit that literally still had M16A1s full auto. Yeah, they just never got the new stuff issued. Their state didn't buy it. So we obviously had to switch those out. The last thing you want is Private Joe Snuffy out there with a fully automatic. You want 3-round bursts. And so like the idea was, I was thinking like museum quality stuff. And I guess a lot of guys that wrote the Order of the Centurion books were thinking along those lines. And Jason didn't want like the whole, because he's the cannon master for Galaxy's Edge. He did not want the enemy only using like museum pieces, because there aren't that many museums in the galaxy. And so we tweaked it some, but yeah, I knew I wanted the HKPP. And then I just did a Google search for sci-fi tanks, and I found like what my model was and sort of went with it. It was a lot of fun to write.
I got to tell you that right before that huge tank battle, the thing that was like really took my breath was, and once again, if you haven't read the Reservist, now's your time. Jump in the water, get off the boat, because I'm laying the explosives and they're gonna hit the charge. So one thing caught in my breath, that they're heading for that big fort or the city over the mountain, and they just got shredded for like the 9th time, and I'm like, oh, these poor bastards. And they're catching sight. Their scouts were catching sight of something, in that overhang, and then it turns out to be a freaking attack plane. I'm like, oh my god, these poor bastards. I was like, oh, this is gonna hit the fan. And I was hoping the HK mech would show up, like right then. Like, no, you need to deploy some resources for these poor bastards. They're not gonna make it.
So that scene was originally not quite as gruesome, because I was trying to give them like some lull in the action, and Jason's like, no, pedal to the metal. And so it originally wasn't as bad. I had it as an old, like I said, I used the idea. Well, they raided the armories because they, the MCR was petering out. They sort of put all in on that Utopion raid and on taking down the ship in Legionnaire. So I didn't want to give them too much. So I'm like, okay, more museum pieces, right? Jason's like, no, that's not how this is going to happen. So that was a lot of fun to edit because it was a lot more gruesome in the final product. Even when he sent me, once I did it, originally Santos didn't die, and he sent it back, and he's like, yeah, this has to
He needs to
happen.
die.
He needs to die. I was like, no, not Santos. I like
Is that Matt?
No, I don't think that's Matt. How you doing, sir?
It's me, but I don't know if you can hear me.
Oh, we can
I
hear
can
you.
hear you.
You sound
Okay.
glorious.
Good.
I was
So
telling him how you were so evil and you killed Santos because originally I was going to let him live.
Oh, that was me?
Yeah.
for those of us who aren't aware or might not be watching video, we just had Jason Unspach join us. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing all right. I wanted to make sure that JR wasn't lying.
Oh,
Oh, you should have showed up earlier. Oh my God, he dropped dimes like manhole covers. It was
That
epic.
sounds about right.
But he went out like a champ, so you did it right at least. If he had to die, like he died with his boots on.
That's true. That's true.
We were just discussing the HK PP mech scene against the tanks, and then our collective oh shit moment when they're scouting toward the fort that they're going to occupy, and they get hit by that attack plane.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Yeah. We went back and forth about that one quite a few times.
But I mean, we're pretty much all in agreement that you guys really hate the reserves, because I think out of any other unit, these guys took like the biggest beating I've ever seen in a Galaxy's Edge book.
I think what was funny was the idea that like we were talking about, okay, well, how does the Legion like have, it's not like there's like a special forces reserves, right? Like I go
There
train a
actually
couple
are
of weekends. Yeah,
There
like
is.
I go
There's
train
national
once a
guard.
week, and then they're like, go ahead and go with SEAL Team 6. We think we found bin Laden. I'm like, okay, well, let me see if my boss will give me the time off. Like that doesn't happen, right? Like that's not a thing. But we were like, but we're gonna make it work for the Legion. And so then I think, JR, was it in your mind? Because it makes sense to me that the House of Reason already kind of hates the Legion. So here they have an opportunity to really just stick it to some Legionnaires, and the Legion commander's not going to stick up for them.
Yeah, that was in the head because I was trying to justify it, and I was like, well, if you have other polities that exist and that fall under the scope of the Republic, they would have had their own standing militaries before they were voluntold into the Republic. And so my thinking was, well, some of those units had to still exist, even if it's just ceremonial. I mean, we still have a Swiss Guard, and I don't think they've been active. I mean, other than guarding the Pope, they're still around, right? So there are ceremonial units that exist for that. So that was sort of my thinking was, look impressive at parades and stop a few riots. And oh shit, nobody thought we were going to do that.
And the crazy thing on the other side is too that like in my state, we have a National Guard special operations unit.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, they exist.
We have one here. There's another one in Florida. Also, they just disbanded, but for a really long time, we had a long-range reconnaissance unit here as well, fully airborne. 99, like a good chunk of them were Ranger qualified. So, yeah, they exist, and they got to keep themselves polished, on the rest of the month. But when they show up for drill, those guys motor. They put the hammer down and try and see how many donuts they can roll in the parking lot.
That's kind of nice that they don't have to shave their beard, do they?
The special forces guys can stay all camel GQ, but the like the guys from the LRS unit, those guys have to maintain standards.
Oh, that's too bad.
You're into the SF beards, aren't you?
I wear one. That's the only thing high speed about me.
Well, if you get some of those tactical cargo slacks to go with that Galaxy's Edge polo, and you get the glasses, man, you could pull it off.
Yeah, right. That's true. I could totally pull it off. That works out so well for people pretending to be special forces. Like it never comes back to bite them in the ass.
Just tell them it's all about
Oh
the
my
airsoft.
god. Yes, it's all about the airsoft. Oh my god. But yeah, we had there's a fairly big airsoft and paintball field about 10-15 minutes from me, and one day the special forces guys, the Green Berets from the unit in my state, they showed up, mobilized a bunch of 15-year-olds, and took on a bunch of adults that were just there. And those 15-year-olds tore it up. So a friend of mine works at the field, and he was like, dude, these Green Berets just showed up wanting to train, and they grabbed these bunch of kids, and suddenly these kids were like stone cold killers with airsoft. I'm like, if they have airsoft, like they're not stone cold anything.
Right. That's the thing about 15-year-olds though, man. They don't get tired. Like my son's 15, and he can just go and go and go. Like it just there's something to be said for child armies, I think.
I'll make sure I edit that in post.
No, you won't. Don't lie to him.
Fictional child armies in Galaxy's Edge.
So we heard all of the lies and disinformation coming from JR. But what was about him working with you? What was it like you working with him?
Oh, it was so easy because it was just like, JR, this is what we're doing, and it was yes, sir, and that was all. That was basically it. I mean, so for me, it was a dream come true. No, JR was cool to work with because, well, JR had like a really good story to tell in the first place. Like right from the get-go, the first rough draft, like you could just see that this was a solid story. And I think that's because it harkened to his own experiences. And so he was able to write with a lot of emotion. So for me, it was just a matter of just kind of saying what I saw, like where I felt things could punch better, where I felt things needed to be explained more, or where less was more, just things like that. And every time I gave JR some information, you know, he ran with it and made it better. And then there were times where I missed what he was trying to do, and he had made some really good calls that we kept in the book and that people have loved. So it was a good, positive working relationship, but JR is just one of the nicest, humblest guys that you'll ever meet. And working with him was the same way. You know, he didn't come into it with any kind of, you know, he came into it probably the most open-minded out of anyone I've worked with. And it was just really nice. Like we spent a lot of time on this book because we wanted it to be a launching pad. Like we thought, all right, this has the potential to be a book that's going to get a lot of eyes on his other works. So let's make it so good that when they're done, they say, hey, I'm going to buy something else that JR Handley wrote. And I think we achieved that goal.
That's fantastic.
Well, to be honest, like when you're writing in someone else's playground, like when you're playing with their sandbox, you don't get upset. You can't let your ego, if they tell you, no, the castle's not going to look like that, you know? And so I knew that going in. It's partly my first published series was writing in someone else's sandbox. So I never career-wise got to the point where like, no, I know exactly what I'm going to do. I know what I'm doing. This is my, you know, like I just never had that.
Mm-hmm.
And I probably never will because there's always someone smarter when you want to play the measuring contest, you know?
Yeah.
So that makes it really easy. And then for inspiration, I watched a lot of, have you guys seen The Long Road Home?
I haven't seen that yet.
It's a TV show about an actual unit that was in Iraq, but National Geographic put it out.
Mm-hmm.
And so whenever I thought I was too happy, I'd like watch an episode of that before I wrote. Because those poor bubbles, they caught hell over there.
Mm-hmm.
It's based on a true story. It's about what happened on April 4th, 2004 in Sadr City.
Mm.
So it's known as Black Sunday if you followed early war Iraq. And so like I use that as my inspiration. I'm like, things are going too well. Let me watch another episode. So what was your go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say, speaking about things going too well, Jason, have you been following the tournament style competition between all of the Galaxy's Edge books in the fan club?
Yeah, that Chris Thompson's doing.
Yes.
Chris Thor.
Is it Chris Thor?
Yeah, we renamed him.
Oh, my bad. The Mighty Thor. Yeah, that's actually really cool. And JR and I had talked about like, hey, that would be cool to do like in March when the NCAA tournament was happening. And then we were like, yeah, it sure would. And like, neither one of us did it. So it's
Well,
cool to see it happen.
happens.
Yeah,
Did
exactly.
Did you see that the reservist won out today?
I didn't see that it won out today. I can see it on the screen now, but I think we all knew that's where it was going. Like they came out strong in the first quarter and they did not let up.
Right
All
on.
I'm saying is I called Uncle Pooty and Vladimir hooked me up.
Oh,
Right?
is that how it works?
That's how it
I'm gonna
works.
have to
You
get
just
hold
call
of
Uncle Pooty up.
Offer
Well,
him some
how
vodka.
how did you think Order of Centurion got on the list, man? I called Uncle Pooty and I'm like, look, my guys need this.
Now you need to call him
Yeah.
and tell him to get all his citizens to vote.
Ooh.
Well, I guess I asked for one too many favors because I got the book and I was asked about Siberia and I didn't really want to know the answer, so I was like, bye.
Yeah, that's a good call. That's a good call. They were closing in on your location.
So did
So-
did JR tell you his mystical experience about deciding what the race for Rissa Swan was going to be?
No, I didn't hear that. Like actually, like I don't know, JR, in the final version, I think we just had the one race, right?
Yeah, that's the only one he's seen. He didn't see the rough draft that had the two.
Yeah.
So originally there was a second alien race that was sort of acting as shot callers, and we just thought that works great if you're setting up a series, but this was intended to be a standalone. And so I think a lot of indie authors were trained to think series, and so it sort of happens that you instinctively throw stuff like that in, and it just didn't feel satisfying to have too much. So we streamlined it down to just the race that was based off of a D&D character. And what he was going to tell you is I used the dice roll program.
Uh-huh.
It told me what page to open up in the D&D manual, and that happened to be the Knoll.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, that's pretty smart. As long as it didn't violate any copyrights.
Well, we changed it enough because the Knoll aren't that cool.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're cool, but they're
not that cool.
Rissa Swan cool.
Which is cold, especially if you're in the wrong armor.
Yeah, for real.
Uh-oh, Hasbro's knock on our door.
Yeah.
Inspired
dude,
by and then altered a lot. There we go.
Gotcha.
Please don't sue us.
Yeah, just close the curtains and lay down on the floor and stay quiet. That's what I do.
So Jason, what was your favorite scene of the book since you did all the editing and the ship mastering, if you would?
My favorite scene, and I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't heard it, but it's actually the end of it's right at the end of the book. Not when they kind of recenter, but at basically the end of their deployment. There's that scene, and I remember reading that, and I was like actually feeling fatigued with Fetch. I was like, oh man, how much more slog can this go? And not like in the sense of writing, but like in the sense of here's a leg. It's sort of like you watch like a Band of Brothers or something like that.
Mm.
There's that episode where they're getting shelled. There at the Battle of the Bulge just over and over again, and you reach a point where you're like, okay, no, seriously, this is enough. Like, how much more can these guys take? And I think you reach that point with Fetch, and they're sort of like, all right, let's go again. And then you get that ending, and I felt like that ending, which I don't know if I should give a spoiler tag and just say it, but that ending just sort of felt like this relief, and it was so well done that I was like, oh, dude, you just nailed the close of this book. Because I wasn't sure how you were going to close it. Honestly, I was like, I know I'm running out of time, but how is this? I'm running out of pages, but how is this going to close? But it just felt perfect.
Yeah, ending was solid.
That was one of my favorite characters. Of all the ones that, they said if you could keep writing, obviously hunt down the major, but I'd like to know more about that bartender that actually started in Kill Team, I think, when they're recruiting. But the bartender, I want to know his story, and I wanted to know the curmudgeon of the night, Sergeant Major Logan Scott.
Yeah,
I want to know what the hell happened to make that man so grumpy.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, that's the tough thing about Order of the Centurion. Like, we did an insider poll, and people said they'd like to hear more Order of the Centurion tales. And the whole concept there was a bunch of standalones, because obviously you're not going to get like, Medal of Honor winner from the same unit over and over and over again. But I think that there is some room to develop more stories and to have some series that kind of flesh that out as we kind of move into the expanded universe phase season 1, because I kind of look at season 1 as the original trilogy, like if we're looking at Star Wars, and season 2 is going to be another trilogy. But there's a lot of side story to explore right now, just with what happened between those first 9 books.
Hogus and Skriz for the win.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, dude, I love Skriz. He's awesome. Don't kill him. Don't do it.
Like
Jason's like, they get to kill every character I like, but I create one stupid cat person.
Well, so Skriz was one of Nick's creations, right?
Oh, okay.
That came out of Galactic Outlaws. So if you read Galactic Outlaws, Nick he may or may not like me kind of like pulling back the curtain, but I don't care. He's not here. Nick took, when we first started writing that, Nick said, okay, I'm going to write, I've got this idea for a bounty hunter. He's going to kind of be like this old man, like Clint Eastwood, Charles Bronson. That was Tyrus Rex, right?
Yeah.
He said, so I'm going to write him. And I said, and you write like the up and comer. And so I wrote Wraith. So everything that was Wraith in that book was me writing, and everything that was Tyrus Rex was Nick writing. And then when they combined, I took over and did the scenes where Wraith throughout the book is me. So I end up with this Skriz character that, like, in that first book is just like yabba jabba wabba like the whole time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, I don't know what to do with this guy. Like, he's got a co-pilot, he's got Ravi. I don't want to put, feline Chewbacca in the cockpit. And so I was like, I think, can I kill him? And he's like, no, don't kill him. So I didn't kill him. And then, he disappears in Kill Team because you go back in time and he's not really an Attack of Shadows. So then in Sword of the Legion, like, we had Skriz. Then he finally started developing into a character, and obviously by Message for the Dead, he's making some contributions. And at that point, I didn't want to kill him. But right in that second book, I was like, dude, I've got this extra character that can Keel just like put him out the airlock or something.
And that's the other thing that we're really excited about. There should be a Wraith series coming up soon, right?
Yeah, that one's being developed. So like since it's the Insider podcast, I'll just lay it all out, right? We're working on Wraith. We're working on finishing up the third Savage Wars book. The second one is done. It's just going through edits, and it's such a complex novel. Like, there's 2 parts. There's a part that is Rex training the Legion. This is going to be called Gods and Legionnaires. And then there's a part where Nick does his thing and he delves into the mind of the savages. And if you've read Imperator, you know how like wild Nick's imagination can get. So he's got this big savage arc, kind of like giving us an idea of what they're doing, what they think they're doing, how their hierarchy works and their society works. And so we completed that and decided, yeah, we can't just send this out as a beta copy because people are just gonna they're gonna get brain damage. So let's edit it, and after that, we can give something that's solid. So you'll end up getting an edited version, like basically the complete novel, and we're hoping that'll be in a week's time or so.
Oh, right on! That's
Nice.
Fantastic.
Yes, so that's done. But so we feel this urge as Takeover's coming to a conclusion. We feel this urge like we've kind of got to pick up season 2 again. So we've got Wraith under development, and then we've got season 2 under development. And I think what's going to end up happening is those books are going to start coming out around the same time, where maybe you get like a season 1 book, or season 2 book 1, and then you get Wraith book 1, and then you get season 2 book 2, and then you get Wraith book 2, something along those lines, with more Tyrus Rex mixed in the middle.
That's fantastic.
Nice.
Yeah, I got to tell you, the Takeover number 3, that going to the Insiders and then just coming out for sale the other day, that was a hell of a rabbit chase in that book. That story. That was fun.
Yeah, that guy's having fun. That installment could have just been a movie by itself, right? Like just one of those falling down type movies.
So Jason,
yes.
So you got to give us a little bit of insider information and spoilers. So each of the 3 Takeover covers have been sexy in their own right. You've got a 4th one coming out.
Yes.
What are you going to do for the cover for the final installment when you put it all together? Which one are you going to use, or is there going to be a 5th sexy cover we get?
I'm not sure. We were talking about that. And Tommaso, who's this Italian guy, he's the artist. He said he kind of has drawn those covers. He's got it in a mindset that he could put them all together into a panorama. The downside to that is I think it might be a little bit too distracting. So I can say that our goal for the 4th cover is to have him draw a Kublaran warrior, so we can see what Kubs look like,
Dude.
along with.
Badass.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought that would be pretty cool to draw him, and maybe revisit Carter. But so that's our thought on that one. But for the final cover, it might be as simple as doing a vote and saying, "Hey, out of the 4 covers, which one should be the anthology cover?" Or do we draw something else, or have someone draw something else?
Have you
Go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah. Have you guys figured out who's going to narrate the Wraith series when it hits Audible yet?
So, like, it's tough finding out who's going to do what. Like, we know, like, it seems Ray Porter is pretty well set to do all the Tyrus Rex novels. Audible, I know, is trying to get R.C. Bray, or tells us that they're going to try to get R.C. Bray to do season 2. We'd love that. You know, he opted out. So if he has the ability to opt in, if they name him a price he can't refuse or whatever it is, then that would be solid. For Wraith, I'm not sure, because obviously R.C. Bray did a great job with that Wraith character. So if we couldn't get like Ryan Reynolds, then like I doubt he'd do it.
James
if we
Earl
couldn't-
Jones.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Yeah, Morgan.
Oh
Freeman.
man, I'm very tempted to get a action going where we just try to get Ryan Reynolds to narrate for Wraith.
Yeah, Ryan Reynolds doing Wraith, or if we do, if we have Masters write the KTF Me screenplay, and have Ryan Reynolds narrate that. I started working on that for fun, just to mess around, with the idea being that Masters is bugging Chun for his publishing contacts because he's written a screenplay, and then that's just make that a freebie. But yeah, so I mean, I really like the job that Mark Boyette did on Order of the Centurion, and I think that he might have the ability to get that kind of wisecracking side of Keel.
Oh yeah, he does. Honestly, I don't mean to step over you, but
no, go for it, man.
he narrates a lot for B.V. Larson, and he does a lot of comedy, sci-fi with good seriousness in it. And yeah, just listening to the kind of characters that he comes up with for Larson's books, they're fantastic. I think Mark has a great range, and I can't say no bad things about Mark.
Yeah, and the nice thing is Mark Boyette is a really cool dude. So we're going to start pretty soon our charity fundraiser. We're going to try to raise some money to support veteran suicide prevention charities. And he went and signed 50 physical copies of Order of the Centurion, the audiobook. So we've got those that are going to go up on the store pretty soon to raise money for that. But he has just been all about it. Like, you know, he'll still email me and he congratulated me on the Dragon Award nomination. And so he's a really cool narrator that way. He like gets invested in the books that he records, and that's really cool to see.
I was in love with Christian Rommel. He did an amazing job.
Oh yeah, he
Talk
did.
about a bro crush.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he did a great job.
Him and Mark Boyette were my two favorites after Bray for the series.
Yeah, how'd you guys like Ray Porter? Have you listened to him, any of his stories?
I've listened to him.
That's you, Daniel.
Yeah, sorry, I have this tendency. I first listened to him when Dennis E. Taylor wrote Bobaverse, and listening to the Bobaverse series, it was pretty hilarious. And then I also picked up Paradox Bound, which is kind of a historical or a historical sci-fi one, and he as well does a great job at bringing life to the characters in his narration. I'm kind of thankful that I got to start and listen to his stuff, you know?
Yeah, that's cool, because everything I read of Ray is like all the combat memoirs that he did. Like, I think he narrated House to House, the Medal of Honor winner, Sergeant Belavia's. Is it Belavia or is it Bellavia?
I think it's Bellavia.
Bellavia.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I like to mispronounce things, obviously. Yeah, so he did that. I think he did Outlaw Platoon. He's done just a lot of modern combat memoirs, and so that's what I've mainly heard him from. I don't know that I've heard him do fiction beyond Galaxy's Edge, but he's got a lot of talent too. He's just busy as all get out.
Yeah. Speaking of audiobooks, we'll throw in a little bit of tidbit with one of our hosts that when they were talking about the audiobook for the Reservist, I actually pitched the voice of Walt Robillard as the narrator. But Jason is like, dude, JR, the world is not ready for that much sexiness.
True. Like, it's too much.
It's too much. The galaxy time continuum, it'll just be bad. Like you gotta ease into that one. Like,
Yeah,
but
yeah. Don't worry, man.
Suggested.
I'll get my shot. It's fine.
Yeah, it's coming.
I can't wait for the gruffness of Walt.
Oh God, yes. I'm going to be doing. I'll be doing the Hogus book. Yeah, that. And
Awesome.
just wait till you hear me reading the sexy romance between him and a Tenar. It'll be amazing.
paid 10R. Yeah.
That's lovely. So Walt, did you like the wish fulfillment scene where the sergeant major throat punched the guy for asking questions?
Yes, I did. And something so far, I have to say, because as guys who've been over on the other side of the world and been on those bases and stuff like that, we all know that sergeant major who was walking by making sure that everybody had their PT belt wrapped around their shoulders, right, for walking from base to side of a base to side of a base. But to have in Galaxy's Edge the sergeant majors be so iconic and so much fun, starting with McRaven.
Oh my God, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. That dude just needs his own series. And now the Andy and Broxton books, right? That gunnery sergeant is my fucking spirit animal. I love that guy.
I was thinking of you during that time, actually.
I actually like the sergeant from Order of the Centurion, the Marine.
Mm-hmm.
Like the weathered kind of, like, I like that. I'm like, dude, some stories in there somewhere.
Yeah, that's the classic.
Right.
That's your classic sergeant trope, like your classic Marine sergeant trope that you see in Aliens and you see in Halo. You see him everywhere. And I was like, well, why not? Why not be in Order of the Centurion while you're at it? Just make the cameo guy.
That's like Heartbreak Ridge, but taken up a level.
Oh yeah, but yeah.
I was the commanding officer of my ROTC. We needed to have that in there. Does the Legion have like an ROTC program?
Like, this is what's always tough, because it's weird because you've got like a military, but then you also have like this government that really dislikes the military but really likes to use the military. And so when I think about like how things are now, where you'll see protests like get ROTC out of our high schools, I kind of say, okay, fast forward, they're probably all out of the high schools, and basically to get in the military, someone just tells you, guess where you're going, you're not going to the University of Utopian, you're going into the military, and if you pass the test, you can get in the Legion, but you probably won't pass the test. So enjoy the Army, and I kind of feel like that's how society is, but we haven't really explored it. But I can't imagine them being really cool with any kind of military presence in schools because they would like to pretend that stuff is not happening, and that it's just they're weird. Good thing they got overthrown.
So is there any science fiction books that you take any inspiration from, JR and Jason?
You go first, JR. So I am a big fan of B.V. Larson's The Undying Mercenary series. The way he handled the What Makes You Human, with the resurrections and all of that. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of the Galaxy's Edge, or we wouldn't be here. I really was. Who was the other one? Drawing a blank. Obviously, the Ember Wars, but they're kind of contemporary. So, as far as inspiration, that was it. I read a lot of the iconic Star Wars stuff as a kid because, who didn't want to fly a TIE fighter? Of course, I'm weird because I always understood the Emperor a lot better than I understood the Rebel scum. So
you understood Order, right?
I did. The galaxy is a dark place, you know. So I get it.
One
But,
could say it is a dumpster fire.
Yeah, one could say that. That is like the best line ever. Like, who thought of that? Was that you, Jason, or was
Yeah,
that
that was me. I thought of it, and I knew it was a good line. I wrote the initial paragraph to Legionnaire, and I was like, "Hey, man, that's good." So I like actually messaged a few of my friends that I knew were big Star Wars fans, and I said, "Hey, I'm writing a new book. What do you think of this?" And every single one was like, "Dude, I want to keep reading this." And so I was like, "All right, I nailed it. I nailed this one at least."
Okay. Well, and Daniel, to answer your question further, because whenever you put someone on the spot like this, and this wasn't a scripted interview, you know, you always get that, oh my God, my mind went blank. I will think about all of the sci-fi I read, and I'll make a blog post about all of the best, most iconic military sci-fi.
That's
Po-
And
awesome.
then people can argue with me, and the hate mail will ensue.
Post it in the recommendation channel as well.
Oh, that's right, on
Discord.
Discord, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, it helps to have a moderator. That way he keeps pimping. We love you, Daniel. So what's on the? I know you had just dropped a bunch of huge knowledge bombs about what's coming up, but what could insiders what could insiders expect in like the next 30 days?
Yeah, so you should get an edited version of Savage Wars 2 in the next 30 days. You should get probably some cover art for Takeover Part 4, and I think you might even get Takeover Part 4 in the next 30 days. So both those things will get knocked out. At some point, we're going to be finishing up the second novel for Forget Nothing. If you don't know the story behind that, what you've read is Forget Nothing was initially just the first third of that book, and Audible wanted it to be a standalone. So then we expanded that concept, and we're still working on the second part of the book, which will just be book 2 at this point. So that'll come as well. My hope is that we can get Savage Wars 3 then probably like at the 60-day mark, 45-day mark, something along those lines. And here's something that you guys could give some feedback on, actually. We've been talking about how much insiders enjoy getting shorter installments, like getting chunks of it faster versus just kind of waiting until there's a completed picture. Because we were talking about the Takeover series, and we were thinking, well, would people like to see something like that if it was a different title, just to say, all right, you know, Wraith is kind of moving on the side, so would you rather see, here's, you know, the first arc of Wraith, the first 25, 30,000 words of Wraith, or would you rather just wait to get it all?
I can't speak for anybody else, but I know myself, something like Wraith's story might be fun in installments, but something like the Savage Wars,
Mhm.
I devoured that book.
Mhm.
I loved that book. I mean, just fantastic. I know I devoured ending Broxton's story.
Mhm.
You know, so to have those and have them in one chunk was just fantastic.
Mhm.
But to have that that other thing on the side, I'm loving the format of Takeover, that it's coming in periodic installments, because it gives me something until the next book hits, and it's just fantastic. So I can't, like I said, I can't speak for anybody else, but, and I know, Daniel, you said you're mostly an Audible listener, right?
Yes, sir.
How about a JR?
I mostly read ebooks. But yeah, I don't know. I think I'm with you, Walt. The certain types of story lend themselves better to episodic releases, as short stories or even novellas, as opposed to releasing it all at once. I think it's going to depend on the story you're trying to tell, and that'd be hard for us to say without knowing exactly what story. I really do think that both would work and work well with the right story.
Mhm.
I know that there's a D&D style story that does like a web releases or whatever. It's like chapter by chapter, I think every couple weeks.
Mhm.
And then what they did, or what the author did, was he just condensed it into one whole book and then released it. And it's a Everybody Loves Large Chess book. And
Mhm.
it's kind of funny because you get to tell that it was installment based, but he manages to link it together into one whole story that works.
That's actually a good idea. Maybe we should do that with the fantasy Forgotten Ruin. Maybe we should just say, hey, rather than waiting for this epic, maybe we should just start releasing that in sections in that same way. That might be kind of fun.
Oh, don't threaten us with a good time.
Yeah, I mean, that book, I like that book. It's just, Galaxy's Edge keeps popping its head up. It's like the noisy bird in the nest, just.
So,
we love this bird.
Speaking of RPGs, is there anything coming forward that you want to tell us about?
About that RPG?
I'm hoping that's a yes. Yeah, about the Galaxy's Edge RPG miniatures, whatever, something.
Yeah.
I want to throw my money at you. You got to give me
something. For Galaxy's Edge? No, I mean, a lot of people have been kind of talking about doing kind of a fan-made one, and I think that would work. For us, it's just a matter of bandwidth, right? Like it's like I can see the fun of it, but I can't make the time to oversee it. And we've gotten a few people that have pitched us some concepts, but the pitches tend to be, hey, and you work closely with me and I'll check in, and it's just like, I just don't have time to do that. And oftentimes the pitches are, and all I need is, $20,000 to get started,
God.
That kind of thing. So like, yeah, that's all any of us need, buddy. But
today in the Discord, actually, I don't know if I could find it quickly because
it was in lobby chat, I believe.
It was the lobby chat. Somebody in the lobby chat posted the rules for a Galaxy's Edge miniatures game.
See, now that's pretty cool. And I think that is something that we can probably support and get behind. Like as far as getting some artists to say, give us some 3D models.
Yeah, Templar.
Yep.
Templar.
Yeah, see? Yeah, so we can get some artists to say, hey, get some models put together, and then people that have 3D printers can just run wild with it,
Absolutely.
What?
So, I'm not sure how... would that be just something only fans are doing? Or because for those of us that don't have that skill set but would be interested, you don't want to run afoul of copyright laws either if there's someone selling something for a profit,
So the way that you do it for 3D printing is pretty simple. You say, hey, I have this model that I would like you to print, right? Like this. I say, okay, cool. It takes this much filament and it takes this much time. I'm going to charge you for filament and the time of my services. We don't charge for actually selling the model.
Okay.
There you go. Yeah, right. Which is similar to what Clint Holmes is doing over there, making challenge coins and things like that. Mm-hmm. It's such a weird thing because at the end of the day, like neither Nick or I feel greedy about it because we know that the success of Galaxy's Edge is because we have had such great supporters and such great readers and listeners. So like, if you see someone so excited about your own properties and what you've put together that they're saying, hey, I'd like to make challenge coins and can I charge for my time? Neither one of us want to be the corporate entity that's like, no, like just go straight CBS on you and say, like, absolutely not. And yet, we'll hear from our lawyer who's like, oh, you got to be careful. You got to be careful because if you set a precedent, then you can lose out the rights to some stuff that you might want to have control over. But stuff like that, I don't think that interferes. I think the only time that you run into trouble is if you have people that are creating some pretty good new art, like sort of saying, hey, I'm going to make, let's just use an example. I'm going to make a Kublar miniature, like a cube miniature, and there's no conceptual cube. And then we come out with one and it looks similar and you say, hey, that's my design. That's, I think, where you run into trouble. It tends to be more with that kind of copyright stuff.
Yeah, that's why sorry.
I was going to say, so if someone was so motivated and they didn't need $20,000 on the upfront, mm-hmm. You'd be willing to at least entertain the offer.
Yeah, I mean, totally. We'd be willing to entertain the offer. Like if someone wants to make a labor of love and the community latches onto it, then yeah, I think that we would absolutely be open to saying, all right, well, how can we take this to the next level? Like we're already creating an RPG for Forgotten Ruin, and that's just been a ton of work, and I don't do anything on that. That's like all Nick. Like I told Nick, yeah, let's do an RPG, but just so you know, I am completely checked out on this. I'll do Galaxy's Edge stuff. You focus on this, but it's been a lot of work. So but all that said, if someone puts something together and it ends up building up and going, and it's a platform that people like, yeah, like then you can come alongside and say, hey, let's work something out more formally now.
So back to an earlier topic that we brought up last podcast. Have you guys made a headway on the getting the fan fiction stuff sorted out? Because we've got a couple people chomping at the bit in the Discord server at the very least saying, hey, I want to release something or whatever. And it's like, just hold up.
Yeah.
Jason and Nick are figuring it out right now. You know?
Yeah. My webmaster, he told me last week that he's planning to do a migration and kind of a redesign of the site. And part of that is going to include having like some Galaxy's Edge forums where we can have something like that set up inside. Barring that, like, I guess it just kind of depends on how official you want things. Like nobody, it's just so weird because of the internet, right? Like when people started writing Star Trek fan fiction, like, nobody cared. It's like you just wrote it and you published your magazine and it was done and everyone had a good time. Now it's so easy, unless the owner, like, the people that own the property, Gene Roddenberry, is going through the store, he's not even going to know what's going to happen. Now you invariably get tagged and pinged, and so it turns into something where it's like, hey, what do you think of this story? That's where we can run into some trouble. But I mean, I would tell people if they want to just go for it and just say, hey, I like writing. I want to try writing. I like this universe. I want to write in this universe. I would say go for it. If it turns into, I want to do this and I'm hoping that everyone likes it and people like it so much that maybe it gets picked up for a contract and published as a real book, then at that point, I think we have to have some kind of official way to communicate that, official way to get that before us. But anyone that just wants to write Galaxy's Edge fan fiction, yeah, man, I just go for it. Like, I wrote Star Wars stories when I was a kid. I did all that stuff. So I'd say just go for it. But as far as us having kind of an official presence with whether it's a contest or anything like that, or an official forum that's endorsed, we're still working on getting that built.
Okay.
That's excellent. I mean, it is. You got to admit that there is such a wealth of talent among a lot of the fans that are out there, from the challenge coins to now Templar doing, like I said, doing these miniatures rules. You just got there's a wealth of really fantastic people that are so invested in what you and Nick have created that it's almost, you don't know where to look for all the cool stuff, because everywhere you look is cool.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't want to stymie that either. Like, it's like, that's just awesome. Like, I think every author starting out, when they're putting their stuff together, you wish that things like that would happen. So yeah, the last thing we want to do is discourage people from doing it. And I know a lot of people have been patiently waiting for an opportunity to kind of put it through an official channel. But the reality is, put it through an unofficial channel. Like, just put it somewhere where Galaxy's Edge fans are, and just say, hey, here's some fanfic. I'm not going to go to the lawyer and say, hey, issue a takedown, and Nick's not either. And then if we boil it down, if we come back around and say we're going to do something official, you can still repost it there. So, and it'll probably be refined by that point and better than it was.
So there are specific fan club sites for fanfic of various specific universes. And then there are some generic sites. Mm-hmm. The only thing you run into is if you're going to post it on a website, if the website gets ads, then by default, they're making money off of the IP. Mm-hmm. So you have to do it a subscription model where you're just paying the hosting fee kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But it can already be done. The problem you run into is if you're going to host it yourself, then you run into all those lawyer issues, mumble bumble legal stuff.
Mm-hmm. Right. Assuming someone that's going to call a lawyer sees it and calls a lawyer, right?
Well, I know one of Nick's idea or thoughts that came up was he was a little wary about fan fiction to an extent because they didn't want to you guys didn't want to accidentally land on somebody else's idea or vice versa,
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, that's the downside. And part of that is like dealing with, like, we have a society, we have a fan base of really cool people, and I don't think there's anyone like that in our fan base, but we also have a society full of idiots, right? So so it's like, if
Don't come to Afterlife if you don't want to see anything bad.
yeah,
Come to Afterlife.
right. Yeah, it's sort of like if I watched season 1 of The Office and then I wrote a fanfic and Jim and Pam are getting together, like, yeah, I could sue NBC and be like, I thought of that, but it's like, everyone saw that coming. But it's still a headache. It's still a hassle. And there still are people out there who do just that. If we decide in season 2, we want to pull a Newhart and Goth Solus wakes up and is like, oh, that was a weird dream. Well, I won't do that. I'm not saying that's even some fanfic out there, but you want the ability to do that without someone being like, that was my idea, and then saying, how much money are you making? That's what we want to avoid, because we pay lawyers so much money already.
So as we go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say they're the only ones that win in that scenario.
Yeah, exactly.
Got that
That's
right.
Exactly.
And speaking of the fanfic, what's going to happen is somebody's going to say something to Nick, and he's going to get really passionate. Say, man, that's a great idea. Let's do this. And then he reaches out to me and says, how do you feel about hosting this anthology? And then Nick's like, let's wait a minute.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly it. Like, Nick has all the enthusiasm and he's like one of the most supportive people you'll ever meet. And then you're like, let's do it. And he's like, I don't have time to do that.
So as we come up on the 2-hour mark for our epic YouTube Insider podcast, what are some final thoughts that you guys have as far as Galaxy's Edge and the Reservist in general? Jason, did you want to go first?
No, I want to just hear everyone else go first so I can correct anything that's wrong.
How about it, JR? Your book,
so
your rules.
Off, anybody that's ever been an NCO in any military organization across the planet in time and probably space knows that the scene where the curmudgeon of the ninth throat punches that guy was total wish fulfillment. I've been there, I've wanted to, and JAG is a thing, so I did not.
How about it, Daniel? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, JR.
I just say it was a lot of fun to work with them. I learned a lot, and everybody that asks, because I get a lot of questions when we get more from the reservists. I'm not opposed to the idea, but don't bug me, bug Jason and Nick.
Daniel, go ahead.
Yeah, so Galaxy's Edge, fantastic series. I'm always looking forward to the next release. And it was very neat hearing JR talk about his time in the sandbox and how he got to the point of getting his story out there. So yeah, like I said, I'm just excited about the next Audible release and see what comes up.
Right on. Jason?
Yeah, I can follow my cue. I think the Reservist was just really cool, and I think JR did so many things. Like, it kind of sounds cliche to say that you do something brave, but he did so many things. He made so many choices that I don't know other people would have made. Like, I remember writing a note to him, and I was like, hey, Fetch is kind of getting to be a bit unlikable here. Like, just the way he's dealing with things emotionally, the way he's chewing out these guys who are putting their lives on the line. And JR was like, hey, you know what? I was kind of a dick when I was in this role. And there's that tendency to make a character that always makes the right decisions, always values his subordinates, is like, well, tell me what you think, specialist. That guy that never bites anybody's heads off, that is just a complete stoic that sees people die and just doesn't care. He's just like, hey, I'm Rambo. That's an easy character to write. And JR didn't write that character at all. And yet he made this sort of this guy who is a regular guy that has kind of a warrior spirit and rises to the occasion, but it's still a struggle for him. Like, the whole time it's a struggle. It's a struggle emotionally, mentally, and physically. And it would have been so easy just to write this guy who is the reservist, and surprise, he's the baddest man in the room. But he didn't do that. He took the hard way, and I think he made a book that stands out so well because of that. And so, my hats are off to him for taking that approach. It's not the approach I think I would have taken. And so as a result, I think it kind of exemplifies what that series is capable of, getting some different perspective from people who still understand military science fiction and understand the appeal of military science fiction, but getting a different view from it. So those are my thoughts on The Reservist. It's one of my favorite books in the Order of the Centurion series. And then as far as just Galaxy's Edge stuff in general, Audible Studios has 4 audiobooks, and Nick and I were just talking earlier today, and we're like, hey, it would be really nice if some of these would come out like soon. So hopefully the sooner the better. I don't know if there's a way to speed it up. Maybe tell your Alexa to call Audible customer service and then bug them. When's the next Galaxy's Edge audiobook coming out? I've heard that's a thing. But I think everyone's so supportive already. Requiem for Medusa is just still selling like crazy, and and we've been pleasantly surprised for a book that was released that long ago. So we're hopeful that when Savage Wars finally gets recorded and Forget Nothing comes out and Karen's book comes out, we're hopeful that we'll just build a bigger and bigger profile, which will hopefully make those people that have scripts and have other multimedia things on their desk take more notice and say, yeah, we really need to get rolling on this. So that only happens because of your support guys like everybody here and all of our insiders, everybody in the fan club. So just as always, like, we are so appreciative, and we see it, and we're just blown away that it even happens.
Right on. I can't thank everybody enough for coming out and spending a couple of hours to chat this up, because obviously the insiders have a huge thirst for this property and the characters that we've all come to know and love, and we really appreciate when such passion is coming out, not just from you and Nick, but also from the community as a general rule. So it's really fantastic and very greatly appreciated that you guys spent a little bit of time this afternoon or this morning, depending on your part in the world, and just chilling out with us. And thank you so much.
I saw Balder back there. Give him some pets.
Oh yeah, he's my friend from Madame Guillotine. So we were out this morning. He was doing. I taught him how to drop kick a mother. So, so he has 12 commands in English and 14 in German. And the German we don't use in polite company. But that was my latest thing. But the hardest part about the whole training, in general, say hello to your adoring fan base. Come here, say hello. The hardest part in general is how do you get the proper command in German for, hey, drop kick that fool? So that took a little time, but thanks everybody for coming out and for spending such quality time. We hope that we're going to try and get out. My initial hope was to get 2 live shows per month and 2 recorded shows per month. The recorded show is taking some planning because it's almost like a variety show. The first recorded show should drop tonight, I hope, if I can, cut the call and do some editing. And that will actually feature a takedown as depicted in the cover of Prisoners of Darkness. And then for the next recorded show, a special guest, we have Lauren Moore coming on to talk about what it was like to create the Galaxy's Edge Bible, the story Bible. And then we're going to be dealing with a longtime friend of mine, Mr. Nick Garber, who is an amazing artist and owns a comic company. And he's actually going to go through in his alter ego as a mild-mannered federal agent. He is going to go through his kit and how you actually set up body armor to be the most productive for what you're using it for. So that ought to be cool. And we have some other plans in the works where we got some exciting things that'll happen on video. So stay tuned. It's going to be fun. So with that, I am going to hit the stop button. We're going to kick out the Wabanki out the airlock. We're going to put the blasters in the racks, and hopefully